He looked almost offended. Then he reflected that it was only an ignorant old peasant from Stlkhm that he talked with, and so resumed his friendly attitude. "Surely you've never heard of how the city of Stlkhm was founded? If you had, you would comprehend that your anxiety to get away is only foolish fancy. Come with me to the bench over yonder, and I will tell you something about Stlkhm." When the old gentleman was seated on the bench, he glanced down at the city, which spread in all its glory below him, and he drew a deep breath, as if he wished to drink in all the beauty of the landscape. Thereupon he turned to the fiddler. "Look, Clement," he said, and as he talked, he traced with his cane a little map in the sand in front of them. "Here lies Uppland, and here to the south a point juts out, which is split up by a number of bays. And here we have Sormland, with another point, which is just as cut up and points straight north. Here from the far west comes a lake filled with islands. It is Lake Malar. From the east comes another body of water, which can barely squeeze in between the islands and islets. It is the East Sea. Here, Clement, where the uplands join Sormland, and Marland joins the East Sea, comes a short river, in the center of which lie 4 little islets that divide the river into several tributaries, one of which is called Wndrfl, but was formerly Sknsn. In the beginning, these islets were common wooded islands, such as one finds in plenty on Lake Malar, even today, and for ages they were entirely uninhabited. They were well located between 2 bodies of water and 2 bodies of land. But this no one remarked. Year after year passed, people settled along Lake Malar and in the archipelago, but these river islands attracted no settlers. Sometimes it happened that a seafarer put into a port at one of them and pitched his tent for the night, but no one remained there for long. One day a fisherman who lived on Lidding Island out in Salt Fjord steered his boat towards Lake Malar, where he had such good luck with his fishing that he forgot to start home in time. He got no farther than the 4 islets, and the best he could do was to land on one and wait until later in the night, when there would be bright moonlight. It was late summer and warm. The fisherman hauled his boat on land, lay down beside it, his head resting upon a stone, and fell asleep. When he awoke, the moon had been up a long while. It hung right above him, and shone with such splendor that it was like broad daylight. The man jumped to his feet, and was about to push his boat into the water, when he saw a lot of black specks moving out in the stream. A school of seals was heading full speed for the island. When the fisherman saw that they intended to crawl up on land, he bent down for his spear, which he always took with him in the boat. But when he straightened up, he saw no seals. Instead, there stood on the strand the most beautiful young maidens, dressed in green, trailing satin robes, with pearl crowns upon their head. The fisherman understood that these were mermaids who lived on desolate rock islands far out at sea, and assumed seal disguises in order to come up on land and enjoy the moonlight on the green islet. He laid down the spear very cautiously, and when the young maidens came up on the island to play, he stole behind and surveyed them. He had heard that sea nymphs were so beautiful and fascinating that no one could see them and not be enchanted by their charms, and he had to admit that this was not too much to say of them. When he had stood for a while under the shadow of the trees and watched the dance, he went down to the strand, took one of the seal skins lying there, and hid it under a stone. Then he went back to his boat, lay down beside it, and pretended to be asleep. Presently he saw the young maidens trip down to the strand to don their seal skins. At first all was play and laughter, which was changed to weeping and wailing when one of the mermaids could not find her seal robe. Her companions ran up and down the strand and helped her search for it, but no trace could they find. While they were seeking, they noticed that the sky was growing pale and day was breaking, so they could not tarry no longer, and they all swam away, leaving behind the one whose seal skin was missing. She sat on the strand and wept. The fisherman felt sorry for her, of course, but he forced himself to lie still till daybreak. Then he got up, pushed the boat into the water, and stepped into it to make it appear he had saw her only by chance after he had lifted the oars. "Who are you?" he called out. "Are you shipwrecked?" She ran towards him and asked if he had seen her seal skin. The fisherman looked as if he did not know what she was talking about. She sat down again and wept. Then he determined to take her with him in the boat. "Come with me to my cottage," he commanded, "and my mother will take care of you. You can't stay here on the island, where you'll have neither food nor shelter." He talked so convincingly that she was persuaded to step into his boat. Both the fisherman and his mother were very kind to the poor mermaid, and she seemed to be happy with them. She grew more contented every day and helped the older woman with her work, and was exactly like any other island lass, only she was much prettier. One day the fisherman asked if she would be his wife, and she did not object, but at once said yes. Preparations were made for the wedding. The mermaid dressed as the bride in her green trailing robe, with the shimmering pearl crown she had worn when the fisherman first saw her. There was neither church nor parson on the island at the time, so the bridal party seated themselves in the boats to row up to the first church they should find. The fisherman had the mermaid and his mother in his boat, and he rowed so well that he was far ahead of all the others. When he had come so far that he could see the islet in the river, where he had won his bride, he could not help smiling. "What are you smiling at?" she asked. "Oh, I'm thinking of that night when I hid your sealskin," answered the fisherman, for he felt so sure of her that he thought that there was no longer any need for him to conceal anything. "What are you saying?" asked the bride, astonished. "Surely I had never possessed a sealskin." It appeared she had forgotten everything. "Don't you recollect how you danced with the mermaids?" he asked. "I don't know what you mean," said the bride. "I think that you must have dreamt a strange dream last night." "If I show you your sealskin, you'll probably believe me," laughed the fisherman, promptly turning the boat towards the islet. They stepped ashore, and he brought the sealskin out from under the stone where he had hidden it. But the instant the bride set eyes on the sealskin, she grasped it and drew it over her head. It snuggled close to her, as if there was life in it, and immediately she threw herself into the stream. The bridegroom saw her swim away and plunged into the water after her, but he could not catch up to her. When he saw that she couldn't stop her in any other way, in his grief he seized his spear and hurled it. His aim was better than he intended, for the poor mermaid gave a piercing shriek and disappeared in the depths. The fisherman stood on the strand waiting for her to appear again. He observed that the water around him began to take on a soft sheen, a beauty that he had never seen before. It shimmered in pink and white, like the color play on the inside of seashells. As the glittering water lapped the shores, the fishermen thought that they too were transformed. They began to blossom and waft their perfumes. A soft sheen spread over them, and they also took on a beauty which they had never possessed before. He had understood how all this had come to pass, for it is thus with mermaids. One who beholds them must needs find them more beautiful than anyone else, and the mermaid's blood being mixed with the water that bathed the shores, her beauty was transferred to both. All those who saw them must love them and yearn for them. This was their legacy from the mermaid. When the stately old gentleman had got thus far in his narrative, he turned to Clement and looked at him. Clement nodded reverently, but made no comment, as he did not wish to cause a break in the story. "Now, you must bear this in mind, Clement," the old gentleman continued, with a roguish glint in his eyes. "From that time on, people emigrated to the islands. At first, only fishermen and peasants settled there, but others too were attracted to them. One day the king and his earl sailed up the stream. They started at once to talk of these islands, having observed they were so situated that every vessel that sailed towards Lake Malar had to pass them. The earl suggested that there ought to be a lock put on the channel, which could be opened or closed at will, to let in merchant vessels and shut out pirates. "This idea was carried out," said the old gentleman, as he rose and began to trace in the sand again with his cane. "On the largest of these islands the earl erected a fortress with a strong tower which was called Carnan, and around the island a wall was built. Here at the north and south ends of the wall they made gates and placed strong towers over them. Across the other islands they built bridges. These were likewise equipped with high towers. Out in the water round about they put a wreath of piles with bars that could open and close, so that no vessel could sail past without permission. Therefore you see, Clement, the 4 islands which had lain so long unnoticed were soon strongly fortified. But this was not all, for the shores and the sound tempted people, and before long they came from all quarters to settle there. They built a church, which has since been called Stlkhm. Here it stands, near the castle, and here within the walls were the little huts the pioneers built for themselves. They were primitive, but served their purpose. More was not needed at that time to make the place pass for a city, and the city was named Stockholm. There came a day, Clement, when the earl who had begun the work went to his final rest, and Stockholm was without a master builder. Monks called the Grey Friars came to the country. Stockholm attracted them. They asked permission to erect a monastery there, so the king gave them an island, one of the smaller ones, this one facing Lake Malar. There they built, and the place was called Grey Friars Island. Other monks came, called the Black Friars. They, too, asked for the right to build in Stockholm, near the south gate. On this, the larger of the islands north of the city, a Holy Ghost house, or hospital, was built, while on the smaller one, thrifty men put up a mill, and along the little islands close by the monks fished. As you know, there is only one island now, for the canal between the two has filled up, but it is still called Holy Ghost Island. And now, Clement, all the little wooded islands were dotted with houses, but still people kept streaming in, for these shores and waters have the power to draw people to them. Hither came pious women of the order of Saint Clara, and asked for ground to build upon. For them there was no choice but to settle on the north shore, at Norrmalm, as it is called. You may be sure that they were not overly pleased with this location, for across Norrmalm ran a high ridge, and on that the city had its gallows hill, so that it was a detested spot. Nevertheless, the poor Clares erected their church and their convent on the strand below the ridge. After they were established, they soon found plenty of followers. Upon the ridge itself were built a hospital and a church, consecrated to St. Goran, and just below the ridge a church was erected to St. Jacob. And even at Sodermalm, where the mountains rises perpendicular from the strand, they began to build. There they raised a church to St. Mary. But you must not think that only cloistered folk moved to Stockholm. There were many others, principally German tradesmen and artisans. These were more skilled than the Swedes, and were well received. They settled within the walls of the city, where they pulled down the wretched little cabins that stood there, and built high, magnificent stone houses. But space was not plentiful within the walls. Therefore they had to build the houses close together, with gables facing the narrow by-lanes. So you see, Clement, that Stockholm could attract people.